Hey everybody, welcome back to another review. Hope you guys been enjoying the content on the channel as of late. We are back once again with another review. Just been pumping out reviews left and right. Just, the year's coming to a close, so just getting all the last films that I wanted to see out here before the year ends. And this one is definitely one that I was curious to see. That film being Chicken Run, Dawn of the Nugget, which is the sequel to Chicken Run, which came out in 2000, so over 20 years later after the original film. And this was made by, or distributed by Netflix, again by Aardman, providing the animation. Chicken Run being an origin point, I believe, for Aardman. I believe it was their very first film that they worked on. It was, yeah, Aardman's first feature-length film. Um, and I believe, yeah, up until a certain point, it was the highest grossing stop motion film of all time. Uh, no, but I think it still holds it. Yeah, it still holds it. It's considered the highest grossing stop motion film of all time. Um, I absolutely adore the original. I think the original is one of my favorite animated movies of all time. It's a classic, and um, we are here with the sequel. Uh, Different voices this time around. We have Zachary Levi playing Rocky. We have Thadi Newton from Westworld, yeah, Westworld check, playing Ginger, as they are now settling into their new life away from from captivity, and they have a daughter now named Molly, played by Bella Ramsey, who you guys would know as Ellie from the Last of Us TV show. Um, she's a curious young person, and she's eager to get out to the other side of the island because they live on an island, and she wants to get across the river and see the world for herself. Curiosity gets the best of her, and she embarks on her own, and she gets captured by some humans who are operating a chicken factory, making like chicken nuggets and stuff like that, hence Dawn of the Nugget. And Ginger and Rocky, once again with their fellow friends, uh, try to rescue Molly instead of getting out of said uh, captivity. They now have to enter back into such a captivity and try to rescue their daughter as well as all the other chickens uh, that are being prepped for the slaughter. So, as I said up front, I think the original is a classic. I think it's one of the best, probably the best that Aardman had ever did. Aardman being a rarity, it seems, in terms of visual format, because stop motion is a dying art, and Aardman's still keeping it alive. And to say up front, aesthetically, the film is just beautiful. I mean, the attention to detail on each of the characters and just the more colorful design that this film has versus the original, which was a little more subdued. It's very welcomed, and it adds more expression, and it just really, really brings a lot of that animation style to the forefront and really highlights such a style. And it's really, really well done. The voices are good. All the voices seem pretty intact. I'm not sure if there are any returning players. I'm pretty sure there are. Um, but everyone seems to fill out their roles well enough. I would say Zachary Levi is probably the only one that seemed a little off to me. Thoughty Newton seemed fine. I actually thought Bella Ramsey was a standout for me. Um, and it has it doesn't have the spirit of the original, but it does bear its own form of spirit, which is to say that the film has a distinction from the original, because the original had more metaphorical, or at least say more of an underlining metaphor to its plot, because the idea of captivity and the idea of these, the chickens trying so desperately to leave, and being prepped for slaughter and all that sort of stuff. There were illustrations of concentration camps and all these other undertones that were buried in the original that really heightened and give a little more of a depth to what you were watching. With this, it's a lot more blatant and a lot more straightforward. And that is a little bit of a downside for me personally. I wish that there was that layer that was in the original, but as I said, it doesn't have that spirit of the original where it has that meat. So what you get is something that is pretty bare bones, pretty familiar, pretty in some respects a a reminiscence because of just how the narrative sort of plays. It hits on similar beats here and there, similar beats of tension, but it also has its own style, its own spirit, and I found myself rather engaged, not completely won over by it. It does because ultimately the film trades also certain ideas because the original was all about teamwork and um, about again these other ideas about captivity and about slavery. With this, it's a lot more about selfishness and a lot more about ignorance and the consequences to being in that, to having such a mindset, and the restrictions almost to bearing that mindset. Um, and it almost encourages those mentalities to drive its narrative forward, which I think make it less resonant and at times more artificial by design. Um, but it's not boring. It has its charisma. It has its value. It's it's fair. I think that's the best way to put it. And for a sequel that took as long as it did to make, um, and a sequel to one of my favorite animated films of all time, for something to be just fair, I think is satisfying. Um, so I mean, it is not the original. It certainly is its own thing, um, but I rather enjoyed myself with it. It's 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 dazzling visually. It has a charm, uh, but it trades in that those layers for more surface, and thankfully the surface wasn't entirely a snooze. It was it was tolerable at times, uh, engaging, but for the most part, fine, just okay. You know, I was not annoyed. I never wanted to turn it off. I never found myself like ugh. Politically, also like those feminine sort of undertones that I was getting seeing throughout. It's tempered, so it's not up in your face all the time. Thankfully, um, so I found myself in a place of mediocrity, but not in a negative space. I was in a place of like, okay, okay, you know. And like I said, for a movie that took 20 years to make, for being ultimately fair, I think is more or less satisfying. When because it could have gone, for something much much more annoying. And the other thing to also think about in terms of doing a sequel to Chicken Run, I'm not entirely sure where you can go after the original. So, it seems like this is the only way you can go because they're not going to go into another concentration camp type scenario again. I mean, that wouldn't really be plausible. It wouldn't work. Um, so it seems like this was the natural step, for a sequel to Chicken Run. And I guess there's a question to be asked of whether Chicken Run 2 should even exist. The answer is no, obviously. But for what we have, as as a follow up, it's standalone, it's distinct, and it sort of thrives in that sort of thing, in that way. And I've rather enjoyed it. So yeah, so those are my thoughts on Chicken Run: Dawn of the Nugget. It was fine. It was fair. Not as good as the original, obviously, but I think it did all right. I think it 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 got the job done, but it didn't wow me. I'll put it that way. So, but yeah. So those are my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts on Chicken Run: Dawn of the Nugget if you guys have seen it, and of course the original if you guys have seen it. It is amazing. If you have not seen it, check it out when you get a chance to. And yeah, so that's going to be it for my thoughts on the film. Thank you guys for tuning in. And until then, I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye.